Hey BookTube, I'm back for another video. This video is going to be my plans video. So my plans for 2025, looking forward to my reading year. I was not very pleased with my reading year for last year, even though I got to a lot of authors that I wanted to get to, and I had the theme of reading Greek literature. I read around 13 books on that subject, which includes all of the Plato that I read and some of the Aristotle that I read. And that's part of my Western canon reading list of going through the classical works of the Western canon from beginning to the end, or at least into the 20th century sometime. I have a whole massive list that I have. I've made that list. I've done some videos of it on the channel before. I'm not sure how good quality they are, but I have been thinking of remaking some of those videos, like reintroducing them and then making videos on each age and giving the authors that I've selected, authors that I've left out, and why, and just discussing that. I think that would be a lot of fun, but we'll see if I get around to that. Anyways, this is my 2025 plan video, and my theme is going to be the exact same. It's going to be Greek literature, because I'm still in the Greeks, and I still want to read them. I'm hoping I can finish that this year, and then I can move on to the Romans, which will be a lot of fun. But not just Greek, but because I'm reading Greek literature, I thought it would be a lot of fun also to include books that not that I own that are also part of that are on Greek subjects. So non-fiction works and fiction works that are kind of centered around Greek literature, I think will be uh, books that I'll use to complement my reading as I go through the primary sources. So, starting off with my immediate reads, what am I going to be reading next? And I'm going to be reading Aristotle. I'm continuing Aristotle. So at the end of last year, I read 3 books by Aristotle. I read On the Soul. I read Metaphysics and Physics. Actually, it was actually On the Soul, Physics, and then Metaphysics in that order. And I read those 3. I read them on my e-reader in public domain translations. So I didn't have any physical copy except for On the Soul, which I have up on there. I read the Penguin Classic On the Soul, which I don't recommend. It's not an introductory volume at all for Aristotle, and the translation was far too literal. Even though because I read other translations or those public domain translations of Aristotle that I ended up reading were a lot more readable than that one. But anyways, that's besides the point. So the next on my list, and it's the biggie, the one that I've been looking forward to, it's Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, but I have 3 editions. So I have the Penguin edition. This is translated by J.A.K. Thompson, who is a different translator from the Penguin on the Soul. So hopefully this guy's better. But then I also have the Oxford, which is translated by David Ross with notes and introduction by Leslie Brown. And then I have the Hackett edition, which I've shown on this channel before. This is translated with notes and introduction and a glossary by Terence Irwin. And initially I was just going to read it in this edition, but I think I'm going to give some of these other ones a try, in the sense that I'm going to see which one agrees with me the most. I'm thinking I'm just going to go through this one, and if I don't like it, or if I find it too literal or too off-putting, then I'll try one of these. Penguin is usually good for introductory volumes, even if they sacrifice complete literal in their translation. But what I do want to do is read the introduction to all of them. So I'm not sure of how long the introductions are. Yeah, the introduction to this isn't terribly long, but they're probably around 20 to 30 pages each. I can't imagine it'd be a lot longer than that. This one is fairly short, and this introduction is Penguin introduction is almost 50 pages, so that one's the longer one. But yeah, I'll read the introduction to every single one of them, and then I'll see which translation that I'll use to continue. Hopefully, I do want it to be this one though, because I find that layout a little bit more complimentary. Anyways, and then on top of that, I'm doing a buddy read with a friend of mine. We've done buddy reads for a while now. For every year we do at least 2 or 3 buddy reads together. Last year we did Crime and Punishment, and I was the one who loved it, but my friend didn't. So, but this year, at the beginning of 2025, she's the one who chose the book, and we're reading The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikabue. I love that. The way the name rolls off the tongue. Murasaki Shikabue. And this is the Dennis Washburn translation. And my friend has the Norton Critical edition, where they include the entire work in this oversized paperback in the Norton Critical, which is edited by the same translator. But I was surprised to find out that this paperback, which I bought just a few years ago, and I thought this is a fairly new translation, this is out of print already, at least in Canada. And that's surprising to me because it's such a beautiful production. It's nice and floppy and whatever. I guess 1,100-page novel on from 1,000 years ago is not a bestseller for Norton, so it's really too bad. You can't find this book for cheap anymore, or for a good price. So those are the books that I'll be reading immediately. I haven't started any of them yet. There's a reason for that, but I won't go into that now. And then we'll go into, actually, there's one more book. I forgot my e-reader. I usually always have a book on my e-reader going, even though I'm going to have a tough time with a 1,000-page book and then Aristotle on top of that. This will just be the slow burner that I always have going on my e-reader, and I really do like having that kind of option. And that's going to be the Lagoon, How Aristotle Invented Science by Armand Marie Leroy. I've showed this one before as a book that I really do want to read. This is fairly long, at least in my e-reader copy. So I don't imagine I'll finish this in January. It'll just be a book that I kind of pack away at as a respite between the Tale of Genji and Aristotle, because I've sampled this already, and despite the subject matter, it seems like it's going to be quite readable. And then I want to go through my plans, basically just kind of give a shelf structure for at least the first part of the year of what my reading might look like. So, because I'm reading Aristotle, I'm going to be reading more of Aristotle. So, that includes his other major works, his Politics. This is the Ernest Barker translation of Politics. I have a Penguin edition of this too on my bookcase. So it's either this edition or the Penguin edition of his Politics, and that'll be right after I read the Ethics. And then I have the Poetics. This is a very short work. It's incomplete because the entire work of Poetics didn't survive us, but it's been very influential for what we do have, because I believe, the introduction here is probably as long, if not longer, than the work itself. So I have that. But then on my e-reader, which I'm not going to pull up now, I do have Aristotle's Rhetoric in a newer translation, just from the past 8 years? I think 2018. So that'd be six or 7 years. So I have Aristotle's Rhetoric, and so that's the final 3 works of Aristotle, other than the Ethics, and I'm going to continue that with what I hopefully will be this book here, The History of Philosophy by Frederick Copleston. And this is an omnibus volume of the first 3 volumes of his History of Philosophy. I want to read the Greek and Rome edition apart, but I want to focus more on his Aristotle and his Plato. I have read this before, in the sense that I got to, I read through most of the first volume, or at least half of the first volume. So this is a big chunkster. This is what, I think 1,500 pages, or give or take. But I read half of volume 1. So I got to, I read through the Pre-Socratics and the Sophists, and then I read through all of Plato, and then I stopped because I wasn't getting it very much. because I hadn't read Plato at the time, and I found it dry or not dry. I just found it dense. I didn't understand what a lot was going on, even though I annotated it a lot. You can see my entire, just maybe not. That's too light. But I annotated a lot because that's usually what I do when I don't understand a work, because I think everything might be important, and I try to jot down what might be important. It's a holdover from university classes that I kind of like, so I don't want to get rid of that, even though it might seem kind of a boring way to read to some people. But I want to read his. He's got about 100 pages on Plato and then about another 100 pages on Aristotle. I want to read those in this volume, which should be manageable. He's a fairly good writer, even though he does quote from the original Greek a lot, which can be frustrating when you don't know Greek. I remember there was a time when I was trying to actually translate the Greek terms so that I could follow along what he was quoting. I know that's going to be a problem, especially as you get along, because he knew a lot of languages, and you kind of have to if you want to be down in knowledgeable with the primary sources of philosophy, works in philosophy. So you have to know your German, your French, even I don't know if he knows Italian, but I know German and French are essentials, of course, and then of course Latin and Greek. But continuing with my theme of Western canon books, so after Aristotle, I've shown these works before because I've talked about them a lot. But after Aristotle, I have the Greek tragedians, and then of course Aristophanes, who's not a tragedian, who's a comedy writer, but this is all their works. I guess I could just hold them up while I'm at it. This is just a compilation work of Greek drama. It's got Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. Then I got two works by Aristophanes, or 2 volumes from Penguin and Aristophanes. I'm not even going to try and pronounce their names. I'm just going to go through them quick because I've shown these before. This is Euripides, my only single volume of Euripides. I do have the Greek Tragedies, volume 1 and 2, from Chicago University Press. These are the older versions. They're translated by David Green and Richard Lattimore. And then I have 2 volumes of Aeschylus. I have Prometheus Bound and Other Plays, and then the Oresteia. I do have another translation of Oresteia on my shelf over there as well, but I'll show this one for now because I'm certain this will be the one that I read. Then I got Sophocles, the Theban plays. So that's Greek tragedians, and then complementary works include like nonfiction works I'll read on the side as like a complementary to them. I want to read this Introduction to Greek Tragedy by Ruth Skodel. I found this one used when I was used book shopping. It's perfect, even though I don't think I'll read the whole thing right away, because half the book, even though it's like 200 pages, half the book is her discussing individual plays. And I think what I'll do is I'll read the very front, or like the very beginning, where she actually introduces Greek tragedy itself, like defining tragedy, approaches, origins, festival, and competition, historical and intellectual background. That's the first 4 chapters, and that's around 70-some pages. I think I'll read that, and then I'll put a pause on this, read the plays, and then once I've kind of got a grip of the plays, then I'll actually read through her analysis of some of these plays, like the Oresteia, Antigone, Medea, Oedipus the King, Orestes, that kind of thing. So I think that's my approach with this book. And then I want to also read, I've shown these other books on my shelf before, but because I found them used, and they're relatively recent pickups for me, but they fit very much into the theme, of course, because they're history books. So I got an Ancient Greece history by Thomas R. Martin, and then which is a very short one. This one I hope I can read very quickly. And I have this big book by multiple different scholars, ancient Greece, political, social, and cultural history. I am looking forward to these, though I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to get to both of them. I might just read the one, and then just leave the other one for some other time when I have a yearn for Greek history, because I have a lot of other complementary works that I want to get to as well, and I'm going to show them presently. Another theme in my classical history, or my classical reading, is mythology, and of course we get a lot of our mythology from the Greek tragedians, but from many other different sources too. But I have a couple of books here on Greek mythology in general that I'll be getting to at some point. And so we start off with the classical, or the classic itself. You know, it's a classic on classical mythology. This is Edith Hamilton's Mythology, and it's Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes. And I have it in this neat paperback. I've always struggled with when I should read this. Should I read this after I've read the source material, or should I read it before? And I'm sure most people read it before, but the thing is, she kind of just goes into the origins of like where these tales come into. Like, so here, this is the beginning of the tale, the start of a tale, and in the italics on top, she gives her sources here. So like, this story is told by Apuleius, a Latin writer of the 2nd century. The Latin names of the gods are therefore used. It is a prettily told tale after the manner of Ovid. The writer is entertained by what he writes. He believes none of it. And this is the story of Cupid's Psyche. So, like, should I read like Apuleius or Ovid before I read that kind of story? Because, you know, it's like a spoiler almost. But I've decided that I'm just going to read them when I get to them. Because I'm not going to be too focused on that, because according to at least Steve Donahue, he says all the audience knew the details of the story anyways. So you are, in fact, the more you know about these stories, maybe the more you might get out of them. So that's the approach I'm going to take. I'm not going to worry about spoilers, because I guess spoiler wasn't really a concept for the stories back in the day. It was more like how you told the story, and I guess that's okay. But my issue is that maybe that works for if I knew ancient Greek. Like, then I could study how Euripides and Aristophanes and Aeschylus and Sophocles, how they tell their stories in their own language. But to me, I'm reading them in translation, so I feel like I'm going to be losing that charm of variation, and that the only way that the stories might hold my interest more is if I don't know what is coming next. Like, I'm going to be constantly thinking of what comes next. Hopefully I'm wrong about that, but I guess I'm a little bit cynical on the process of translation, which is why I always pick up as many translations as I can. But anyways, I have more Greek books on Greek mythology. I have The Myths of Greeks and Romans. This is by Michael Grant. A fascinating study of the world's great myths and their impact on the creative arts through the ages. And it's got a whole lot of illustrations, which makes the binding very weak. But yeah, this is Michael Grant's book on mythology. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be reading this one particularly, because he goes through he goes through many different myths, but he tells them in the context of their source material. So he has a chapter on Prometheus, but he says the story of Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus. So it's basically him just talking about Prometheus Bound and the myth in that context. So I'm like, why don't I just read Prometheus Bound instead of having to read his own chapter on Prometheus Bound? So I'm not entirely sure if I'll read this. Maybe I'll read this once I'm near the end of reading the Greeks, or if I'm done the Greek tragedians. But he also includes Rome in this, so maybe I'll divide it up and just read the Greek parts. I'm not entirely sure. This is very loose. I'm not sure if I'm going to be reading all of these. I'd like to get to as many as I can, but I'm not sure. I'm keeping things open. Then I also have another big book. This is classical mythology. This is more of like a textbook. This is by Mark P. O. Morford and Robert J. Lenardon, and it's the sixth edition. And it's just this big fat work on Greek mythology or classical mythology, and it's got a lot of illustrations too. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, illustrations. So this one, I'm more interested in, but I don't know. It's just another book on mythology. I'm not sure how special it is, and I just realized I forgot two books. Two books on my shelf here. If you see right over here, I've showed them on my last reading update, I believe, on books that I want to read. They are the was it Roger Lansdowne Green, his two books on mythology. He's got the Greek Tales of Greece and Tales of Greece or Tales of Greek myth, and then he's got the Tale of Troy. I think that's what they're called, and it's just like two short works of his retelling of these Greek myths, and they're in two volumes. I've shown them before. They're right over there. I'm not going to go and get them because I can't really pause the video, and I don't know entirely sure how I could edit it together. So I'm just going to mention those as works that I want to read as well. And then I also have this, Traveling Heroes by Robin Lane Fox. This is Greeks and their myths in the epic age of Homer. This is also a fairly recent used pickup, and it's right in that subject matter that I'm going to be reading about, my theme of Greek history. So I'm figured I might as well include that as well. I've not read anything by Robin Lane Fox, but he's like one of the popularizers of that age. So it'll be interesting to read a book of his finally. And then I want to talk about the other theme of my reading that I want to complement while I'm reading my Western canon reading list, and also while I'm reading these nonfiction works, and that's also historical fiction, which is just a new thing that I've done, a new idea that I've had I've got a lot of historical fiction either on my e-reader or on my shelves, in the sense that I like historical fiction a lot, and it's entertaining. So it's because it's a novel form, and I figure like reading historical fiction, zeroing in on these time periods and that I'm reading, will be a fun way to immerse myself in this world a little bit more. And so for the Greeks, the main historical fiction writer that you talked about is Mary Renaud. And I recently about this. This is The Last of the Wine, and I believe this is basically just a portrait of Athens, during the age of Socrates. So so this is a historical fiction work on that age. I did order her other book. Was it The Praise Singer or The Praise Song or something like that, which is going further back in like the epic age of Homer. Where it follows a boy who's apprenticed to an epic singer, somewhat like a Homeric figure, and so I have that coming as well. So I'll read the two works by Mary Renaud, and then maybe when I get to the Age of Alexander in my Western canon reading list, then I'll read some of her more famous historical fiction works, specifically on Alexander. So that's Mary Renaud. I have a whole massive list of historical fiction that I actually came up with for the 8 different ages that I want to read, which was a lot of fun to do, though it cut into my reading time. But anyways, that's it for me. That's basically my form for my reading of 2025. I am going to be leaving it open with other works, because obviously all these books are not Greek and Roman history. So I'm going to leave it open how quickly I get through this. Though the one thing is I really do want to get through the actual primary sources quicker rather than later, because I have been procrastinating on that. I started this project 2 years ago or already, and I'm still stuck in the Greeks. I'm still at Aristotle, and if I continue this up, I won't be done the Romans until 2030. So I don't know. It's I don't want to hold back on that anymore. I want it to take over my reading a lot more, and I don't find that kind of prescription limiting. I find it quite entertaining, and uh, my curiosity is piqued. Though I do have some nagging doubts in the corner of my mind. But I want to discuss all that in a different video. I'm going to make a video to introduce the Western Canon reading list, or reintroduce it, why I'm doing it, what the purpose of it is, and then I'll make specific videos on the ages in which I'm doing this. So anyways, that's it for me, BookTube, and we'll see you next time.